In one of the most prestigious corners of England, nestled in the heart of an esteemed county, a girl was born. A girl whose name would later become synonymous with grace and refinement. Lord Charles Stuart, her father, came from a long lineage of English aristocracy. His name was a symbol of honor, strength, and prestige, and every step he took was observed with admiration by society. Lady Eleanor, her mother, was a woman of impeccable taste and grace, leaving an indelible impression on everyone she met. It was these very qualities that had captivated Charles when they first met, and together they built a family that stood as a paragon of nobility and inspiration to those who sought guidance in their world. They named the girl Eliza, a name that embodied tenderness and light. From the very first glance, it was clear. She was special, not merely because of her beauty or intelligence, but because of the unique harmony of everything that made up her being. There was an undeniable kindness in her eyes, and her soul seemed destined to bring love and understanding to the world. From birth, Eliza was surrounded by care and affection. Lord Charles and Lady Eleanor believed that their daughter should not only be raised in luxury, but also in an atmosphere of strict discipline and tradition, values deeply revered in high society. Every detail mattered, every word, every gesture, every look. They were preparing her for a future where she would be more than just a member of the aristocracy. She would be a role model, a source of pride and respect. Eliza was a gifted young woman. Her education opened doors to a world full of knowledge and possibilities. She easily mastered French and Italian, played the piano with elegance, and her conversational skills were worthy of the highest praise. Yet, despite her many talents and refined upbringing, her most remarkable gift was her beauty. Eliza was the very embodiment of spring, delicate, fresh, radiant like the morning sun, drawing the gaze of all who encountered her. But her beauty was not merely skin-deep. Her warmth shone through her eyes, and her smile could melt even the coldest of hearts. She was never arrogant or vain. On the contrary, her humility and kindness only magnified her charm. When she entered a room, the atmosphere shifted. Suddenly, even the most mundane conversations took on a deeper meaning in her presence. As Eliza grew, her parents not only instilled in her the importance of etiquette, but also the values of compassion and empathy. They believed that true beauty was not just in one's appearance, but in what one brought to the world through their heart and soul. Following their example, Eliza never overlooked those around her. She was always ready to help, to offer a word of comfort, or to share an encouraging smile with those in need. However, life was not as simple as it seemed. Beneath the dazzling surface of aristocratic privilege lay its own shadows. The weight of expectations and obligations imposed by strict traditions and social standing often left Eliza feeling constrained. She struggled to understand why her life had to be so meticulously planned, why she had to adhere to rules that did not always make sense to her. More and more, she felt that amidst all the duties and high aspirations, the simplicity of human emotions was being lost. Despite these challenges, she remained determined to find her own way in the world without betraying the values her parents had taught her. Eliza did not want to be merely a decorative figure in society. She wanted to make a difference. She dreamed of a life where her own desires and aspirations mattered, not just societal expectations. With each passing year, she became increasingly aware that her life was not confined to lavish halls and grand balls. A longing for change began to stir within her, a desire to understand what truly mattered in life. She started to wonder how she could use her beauty and intellect to achieve something greater than just being an ornament in the social sphere. She wanted to leave a mark, not just in the eyes of those around her, but on the world itself. This journey, filled with doubts, aspirations, and inner struggles, was only beginning. Eliza felt hope growing within her. She did not yet know what the future held, but she understood one thing. She was ready to search for her own path, no matter what her family or society expected of her. In her eyes burned a fire that no external storm could extinguish. Eliza was prepared to become who she was meant to be, and though the future remained uncertain, she could feel its birth already beginning. When Eliza turned 19, her parents, knowing the moment was inevitable, decided it was time for her to take her first step into a world where she would be more than just the daughter of Lord Charles Stuart and Lady Eleanor. She would become a true part of high society. It was an event that many had been anticipating. Not only her parents, but also those eager to see how this young woman, with her multifaceted beauty and refined upbringing, would emerge as the jewel among London's aristocratic ladies. For Eliza, however, the moment was filled with a whirlwind of emotions: excitement, anticipation, and even fear that her life, just beginning, might change forever. The ball she was invited to was the highlight of the season, and all of London's elite was in attendance. The grand hall was adorned with the finest floral arrangements, and the glow of candlelight reflected off crystal chandeliers, casting a shimmer upon the most exquisite jewelry. The elegant attire of the guests added to the atmosphere of sophistication and serenity. As Eliza entered the hall with effortless grace, all eyes turned toward her. She seemed unaware of the attention, too consumed by her own emotions. In that moment, she felt as if she were stepping into an unfamiliar, mysterious world where every move she made would carry weight. Among the countless faces she encountered that evening, one young man caught her attention. He stood slightly apart from the crowd, among his friends, observing the scene with quiet composure. This was Sebastian Grey, a young baron whose reputation in society was as enigmatic as his presence. He was tall, with dark hair and piercing eyes that seemed almost hidden in the dim candlelight, yet radiated an undeniable magnetism. He did not seek to be the center of attention, preferring instead to remain a keen observer. And when his gaze met hers, something intangible yet unmistakably real passed between them, holding Eliza's attention in an unspoken connection. Sebastian had noticed her not only for her striking beauty, but for the aura that surrounded her. She was more than just a lovely young woman. She was intelligent, poised, and confident. It was a rare combination, one that was often lacking in London's social circles, where many women, despite their appearance, lacked genuine depth. She was like a hidden gem among the glittering display of society. This uniqueness drew Sebastian to her immediately. Determined to meet her, he approached, and their conversation began with light-hearted talk about the evening's events. But as they spoke, they uncovered deeper layers of each other's thoughts and personalities. Eliza was not only an engaging conversationalist. Her wit and charm made the exchange effortless and captivating, and her ability to listen and understand left Sebastian thoroughly intrigued. Her intellect and sincerity affected him in a way he had not expected. For all his confidence and status, he found himself unable to resist her allure. She, too, felt an undeniable pull toward him. Sebastian was a mystery. He did not fit the mold of the typical English aristocrat, too reserved to be the face of any social circle, too composed to openly display his emotions. Yet in his eyes, she saw something that made her feel special, and his quiet, assured voice resonated with her deeply. His presence promised something new, something significant and out of the ordinary. And then they danced. Their movements were flawless, as if the entire evening had been leading up to this one moment. The dance felt almost magical, an invisible thread weaving their souls together. That night, amid the sea of other couples, amidst the idle chatter and laughter, they both understood that something inevitable and profound was happening between them. As the ball drew to a close and weary guests began to depart, Sebastian asked Eliza to accompany him to a secluded corner of the garden, where they could speak away from prying eyes. In the quiet of the night, surrounded by the scent of blooming flowers and the crisp evening air, their conversation took on a new depth. In that moment, they both realized they shared a connection too strong to ignore. With each passing day, their bond grew stronger. Sebastian sought out every opportunity to see her, and Eliza, feeling as though her life had suddenly gained new meaning, eagerly accepted. Their conversations became more intimate, their gazes lingered longer, filled with unspoken words. And soon, after weeks of stolen moments and deepening affection, Sebastian proposed. It was not merely an impulsive act of passion, but an acknowledgement that they had found in each other what they had long searched for in others. She accepted, her heart filled with both joy and uncertainty. She knew that from this moment on, her life would never be the same. Yet, along with the weight of change, she felt a long-awaited sense of freedom. The engagement of Eliza and Sebastian quickly became the talk of London. Society watched their romance unfold, predicting a future filled with happiness. But beneath the surface of all the expectations, a quiet unpredictability was already beginning to stir, one that would soon bring challenges neither of them could foresee. The happiness that had seemed so close suddenly proved fragile. Just days before the wedding, when everything had been prepared and Eliza and Sebastian's hearts were overflowing with anticipation for the new chapter in their lives, a tragic piece of news changed everything. Lord Charles Stuart, her father, passed away without warning. His death struck the family with unbearable force. He had been their rock, the foundation of their standing in society, and his loss left a void that nothing could fill. His wife, Lady Eleanor, was devastated, and Eliza felt her world crumbling around her. Her father's passing didn't just mark the end of an era in her life, it meant the beginning of a long period of mourning, dictated by tradition. The wedding, already set in motion, had to be postponed. The Stuart family adhered to a strict one-year mourning period, during which any celebrations or joyous occasions were out of the question. The household was consumed by grief, and even the brightest days felt distant and unreachable. When Sebastian heard the news, he was shaken, but his love for Eliza remained unwavering. No matter how long it took, he was determined to stand by her side. "I'll be here for as long as you need me," Sebastian assured her, and his words became the anchor Eliza clung to during the darkest days. He was ready to support her through the hardest of times. But in the depths of his heart, he carried another fear, concern for Eliza's future. He saw more in her than just a woman struggling through grief. He knew that this loss would change her life in ways neither of them could yet imagine. Meanwhile, as their mother was drowning in sorrow, another shadow loomed over the family. Jonathan Stuart, Eliza's older brother. As the eldest son, he inherited both the family title and the responsibility of managing their estate. Eliza had always believed that Jonathan would rise to the occasion, but she had been wrong. He was too consumed by his own indulgences and reckless habits. Rather than stepping into his father's role, he squandered the family's wealth with a stunning lack of foresight. Jonathan spent lavishly on gambling, extravagant jewelry, luxurious travels, and ill-advised ventures. He lived as if their fortune had no end, blind to the danger looming ahead. Eliza watched in growing horror as he made one disastrous decision after another. He ignored every warning, dismissed every concern, until the day came when he had no choice but to face the consequences. He was bankrupt. The news sent shockwaves through the family and all of London's high society. The secrets Jonathan had kept so carefully were now exposed. Eliza could hardly believe that the man meant to safeguard their family's legacy had led them straight to ruin. He was entirely unprepared for the responsibility he had inherited, and now the weight of their financial ruin rested squarely on Eliza's shoulders. Their once powerful family teetered on the edge of disaster, but Eliza refused to be broken. Sebastian and those closest to her reminded her time and again that she had the strength to face this trial. Though the future looked bleak, she was determined not to surrender to despair. She clung to the values her parents had instilled in her: resilience, dignity, and perseverance. "I will survive this. We will survive this," she whispered to herself in the quiet of the night, when doubt threatened to consume her. Sebastian was by her side, and her belief in him and in herself kept her from falling apart. Everything seemed to be crumbling, but she found a quiet strength within herself. Yet she also knew that overcoming this crisis would require more than just patience and courage. It would demand action. Difficult choices lay ahead, choices that could alter the course of her life forever. Eliza, trusting her instincts as she never had before, made a decision. She would not allow Jonathan's recklessness to destroy not just their family, but her own future as well. When Sebastian's parents learned about the Stuart family's financial troubles, they couldn't simply turn a blind eye. Aristocratic traditions were unforgiving, and a bride from a disgraced family, one that had lost its fortune and standing, was no longer a suitable match for their son. A marriage to Eliza, once considered natural and inevitable, now seemed impossible in the eyes of the Grey family. The Stuarts had once been among the highest ranks of English nobility, but now, teetering on the brink of bankruptcy, they were no longer worthy. For Sebastian's parents, it was unthinkable for their son to be tied to a woman who could no longer offer wealth or status. Despite his deep love and devotion, they stood firm in their decision. Sebastian was devastated. His heart was torn apart, but he couldn't defy his parents, not when their word carried so much weight, not when their approval determined his future. He knew that fighting for his love meant betraying his own family, his own legacy. Breaking off the engagement with Eliza felt like the cruelest thing he'd ever had to do, a tragedy he never imagined facing. He couldn't understand how his feelings, so powerful and true, could be overridden by the cold, merciless rules of the world he had been born into. And yet, despite his pain, he saw no way out. When Sebastian delivered the news to Eliza, her world crumbled. Her heart shattered, but unlike Sebastian, she didn't give in to open despair. She had always known this was a possibility. Their love had been a dream, but dreams didn't survive in a world governed by ruthless laws and expectations. Eliza swallowed her grief, forcing herself to accept that her life was about to take an entirely different course. She had once been a woman ready to step into a great love, and now all her hopes for the future had turned into ghosts that slowly faded from her soul. After the breakup, Eliza was left to face reality. Each day grew duller, the vibrance of her life fading away. Instead of the luxury and security she had once known, she and her brother Jonathan were forced to move into a small house on the outskirts of London. There was no grandeur, no splendor, nothing of the world she had grown up in. The old house was cramped and cold, its wooden floors creaking underfoot, its furnishings so simple that at times Eliza felt like she was living someone else's life. Her brother Jonathan, burdened with debt and his own failures, was no longer someone she could rely on. He had fallen deeper into his vices, chasing reckless ventures and squandering the last of the family's resources. His extravagance had left them on the edge of ruin. As the months passed, Eliza struggled to adjust to her new reality, though she found it nearly impossible. The only remnant of her former life was Mrs. Lovecraft, their longtime housekeeper. She was the last remaining link to a time when Eliza had never known hardship, when her concerns had been limited to social gatherings and philosophical musings. Mrs. Lovecraft remained in their service, assisting with household tasks, though her presence now felt more like a painful reminder of everything that had been lost. She was more than just a servant to Eliza. She was a witness to both her joy and her sorrow. In some way, knowing that someone still remembered the woman she had once been brought a small measure of comfort. The days blurred together, and Eliza felt herself slowly becoming part of this dreary new world. She was no longer the radiant young woman who had once turned heads at London's grand balls. Though she still carried herself with the same grace and elegance, she felt the weight of her fading dreams pressing down on her. She forced herself not to think about Sebastian. All that remained of their love were memories, ones she had buried deep within herself, hoping they would not break her completely. But despite everything, Eliza refused to lose her spirit. Society whispered that she was becoming a spinster, that her beauty was beginning to wane, but she still held on to the belief that her life had more to offer. The shadows of the past loomed over her, but perhaps they had also made her stronger. Every morning, she rose with the sun, carried out her duties, and reminded herself to be grateful for what little she had left. Time had become both her enemy and her teacher. 10 years had passed. Time seemed to have stood still for Eliza, trapped in the monotony of her unchanging life. The grand balls where she once dazzled with her beauty were a distant memory. She had lost so much, her youth, yes, but also the radiant dream of a happy future she once shared with Sebastian. She still lived with her brother Jonathan, their modest house on the outskirts of London growing more suffocating with each passing year. Their financial situation had not improved. If anything, it had worsened. Jonathan continued to squander what little they had on reckless gambling and schemes, with no regard for the future. Eliza had tried to accept her fate, but her dreams, like her beauty, had faded. She often wondered how her life might have unfolded if not for that cruel confrontation with reality that had shattered her happiness. Sometimes, sitting alone in their small house, she found herself feeling utterly lost. Who was she now? Who might she have become had her life taken a different path? The questions tormented her, but no answers ever came. Yet fate had other plans. Just when Eliza had stopped hoping for change, an unexpected piece of news shook her world. Sebastian's older brother, Sir Richard Grey, had decided to divorce his wife, an event that sent shockwaves through their family. The divorce was not just a personal scandal for Richard, but also a turning point for Sebastian. According to family inheritance laws, Richard's title and estate, once firmly in his grasp, now passed to the younger brother. This meant that Sebastian had suddenly become Lord Grey, inheriting a fortune most could only dream of. This shift in status didn't just transform Sebastian's financial situation, it also elevated his social standing. Practically overnight, he became one of the most sought-after bachelors in London's elite circles. At 45, he was still in excellent shape, tall, distinguished, and strikingly handsome. His intelligence and charm had only deepened with age, and now, with a vast fortune to his name, he had the power to choose any woman he desired. He had become not only a man of means but a symbol of success. Yet despite it all, Sebastian remained the same man who had never truly forgotten his first love. He thought of Eliza constantly. Even after 10 years, when life had pulled them in different directions, she still lingered in his heart. He remembered every moment, every word, every touch they had shared. Her presence was alive in his memory, and he couldn't simply let her fade away. He often wondered about the choices they had made. Had their love been doomed by circumstance, by the rigid rules of their world? Or had it been something more, something that still had a chance? No matter how much time had passed, Sebastian believed that the feelings they had for each other had never truly died. And now, for the first time in years, he had the power to change everything. Sitting in his grand new estate, surrounded by the trappings of wealth that felt strangely hollow, Sebastian made a decision. He could not live the rest of his life with regret, wondering what might have been. He needed to see Eliza again. He had many reasons. To see the woman who had once meant everything to him, to seek closure, and perhaps even to right the wrongs of the past. Most of all, he needed to know if there was still hope. Once his new title and estate were officially secured, Sebastian steeled himself for what he knew had to be done. He could not delay any longer. He would go to Eliza, to the place that had once been her home, and face whatever awaited him. As he walked through the familiar streets, his heart pounded with anticipation. Every step carried him closer to the past, to a time when life had seemed full of promise. He didn't know what he expected from this meeting, but deep within him, a fragile hope still burned. He needed to know. Would Eliza be willing to trust him again? Or had she left the past behind, locking those memories away for good? Moving forward into a future filled with wealth and opportunity, Sebastian understood one thing with certainty. His heart would always hold space for the woman who had been his first love, the one he had never been able to forget. 10 years. 10 long years, filled with hard work and disappointments, passed before Sebastian saw Eliza again. He was returning to her home with the same determination that once guided his thoughts of her, and with a hope that had never let him rest during his new, changed, but still lonely days. When he saw her once more, his heart skipped a beat, as if only a few months had passed since the day they parted ways. Eliza, just as beautiful as before, now had a face that not only expressed youth and carefree joy, but also the wisdom earned through years of battling life's hardships. Sebastian couldn't believe that after all this time, fate had allowed them to meet again. He was no longer the young baron who once loved her and had nothing to offer except his love. Now he was a mature, successful man with a title, wealth, and experience. But none of these achievements could replace what he had lost, Eliza. He approached her, feeling his heart fill with a nervous excitement that he hadn't felt in years. When she met his gaze, there was not only surprise in her eyes, but something deeper, something that spoke of affection and memories she had carefully kept all these years. Standing before him, Eliza felt the past come alive in her heart again. She couldn't believe this was happening, that he was here once more. Her heart, which she had almost learned to calm and accept, suddenly filled with feelings she'd buried long ago to protect herself from the pain of loss. But now, seeing him, she understood. Those feelings had never disappeared. They had stayed with her all this time, just hidden under a layer of memories, and now they were resurfacing, like winds that revived an old tree. Unable to hold back his emotions, Sebastian opened his heart to her. He couldn't remain silent any longer. Couldn't let the moment slip away without telling her what he had experienced in all these years. He confessed his love, how much Eliza meant to him, and how deeply he regretted the breakup that wasn't his choice, but the result of cruel circumstances. He told her he couldn't live without her, that there was no point in going on in life without the woman who had been his first and truest love. Eliza listened, and despite the years, the losses, and the pain, her heart responded to his words. She felt that fire rekindle inside her, the same one that once warmed them both. Everything she had kept inside all these years bubbled to the surface like a hidden river that had long ago veered off its course. Eliza realized she couldn't fight this feeling anymore, that she didn't want to be alone any longer. The love she had kept in her heart was alive. It was real. And despite the years apart, she was ready to let go of her fears and open up to Sebastian once more. "I agree," she said, her voice, once so full of confidence, now trembling with emotion. "I agree to be your wife." Eliza's words were the honest and most important declaration Sebastian had dreamed of. He felt his soul fill with joy and relief. He knew everything would be different now. He and Eliza would walk this path together, no matter what trials and losses they had faced in the past. The love that had once started so easily was now deep and mature. It had endured time and tests, and it was stronger than ever. And so, many years after their paths had split, they found themselves side by side again. Their wedding wasn't just an event, it was a celebration of love that doesn't die, no matter the obstacles or the tough trials. It was a moment no one could have predicted, but one that was inevitable for those so deeply connected to each other. Eliza and Sebastian's wedding was a grand affair. London gathered the most influential people to witness the revival of this great love. But for Eliza and Sebastian, it wasn't the outward shine that mattered. It was the inner light they had found in each other. Their home was always warm and full of light, filled with the laughter of their children and the joy of being together again. They built their life with love and respect, and each day became a new chance for happiness. Despite all the trials they had faced, they found their way back to joy. Fate, it seemed, had always led them to where they were meant to be, together. And so, after many long years of struggle and patience, Eliza and Sebastian found each other again. They learned to love not only passionately, but deeply. Their love became the embodiment of that strength that can overcome any hardship. And in the end, they lived long and happily, surrounded by their family, filled with joy and love.